From our studios in New York City, this is Charlie Rose.
We begin this evening's broadcast with a reference to last night's broadcast, my interview with Governor Mark Warner of Virginia. The governor talked about the difficulty of a decision he had to make about whether to grant clemency to a man sitting on death row about to be executed. Here is some of what he said. You've got a very tough choice coming up. One of your last acts as governor will be the question of clemency. And you've got on a death penalty case. How are you going to handle it? How do you approach something like that without asking you how are you going to decide, because you wouldn't tell me if I asked? What do you do? Arnold Schwarzenegger has the same kind of decision as governor of California. It is one of the things that make being governor that governors have to look squarely in the eyes and make hard choices.
Well, let me tell you, I've had a number of executions since I've been governor, and there's no harder call to take than that call when you're called before the execution time to see if you want to intervene.
Have you intervened?
I have not intervened in any case so far as governor.
And you're not opposed to the death penalty?
I believe the death penalty in certain circumstances is appropriate, and we've carried out that death penalty as governor. But there is no responsibility I take more serious. There's nothing I spend more time reflecting on, praying on in many cases. We go through a very extensive process where we review the petitions. I've got a team that goes through this, and then ultimately it's my decision and my choice. And you're right, the case that I'm grappling with right now is one of, if not the most problematic, because it involves the destruction of DNA evidence prior to the case being finally adjudicated. I understand very much people who feel that the death penalty should not be a sanction authorized by any state. I disagree with those folks, but I respect their opinion. What you have to do is, if you can, in a sense, accept the death penalty as that ultimate, rarely used sanction, then my responsibility as governor is to decide whether the court acted appropriately, whether there's other evidence that has come to light, or whether there is any extenuating circumstance. So this is, my sense overall is we need to do all we can when we have this ultimate sanction as a possibility to make sure that everyone gets their fair trial, and the ability to, if there is exonerating evidence or exonerating circumstances, to be able to make that case.
We turn now to my interview with Brian Wilson, the great composer and singer. Brian Wilson is here. He is a music legend, as you know, perhaps best known as a creative force behind the Beach Boys, the family vocal group he co-founded. For the band, he composed, arranged, and produced the most beloved and best-known albums and tracks in their catalog. Pet Sounds is one of the most influential LPs in rock history. It is often ranked as the greatest album of all time. The Grammy-nominated Good Vibrations was the Beach Boys' first worldwide million-selling #1 single and is often considered to be the most revolutionary single ever produced. As a solo artist, Brian Wilson's most successful record is Smile. To date, it has sold nearly 1 million copies worldwide, and for 37 years, Smile was the most famous, unfinished, and unreleased album in rock history. He has a new Christmas album, which is called What I Really Want for Christmas. I am pleased to have him back at this table. Welcome back.
Hi, Charlie. How are you?
How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Yeah. Now, what is it about you producing a Christmas album? Is this something you always...
Well, I'll explain the story behind that. My record executive, Clive Davis.
Oh, I know him well.
Called me and said, Brian, I think you should do a Christmas album.
Yeah.
And I said, fine. So he sent over 8 Christmas traditionals, and I chose 2 Beach Boys, and then I wrote 2 individual new Brian Wilson songs, one with Bernie Taupin writing the lyrics, and the other with Jimmy Webb writing the lyrics.
Yeah, Bernie Taupin, who writes for Elton John.
Oh, yeah, he's fantastic lyric writer. So is Jimmy Webb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so therefore, you were often running for this album.
Yeah, yeah.
And can I read the titles in here?
Sure.
Where are they? Oh, here they are. The Man with All the Toys.
Right.
What's that about?
It's just about a guy who found Santa Claus and his helpers. Peeked in the window and saw Santa Claus and his helpers in there.
What I really want for Christmas.
That's just I can't explain it.
Little Saint Nick decked the halls on Christmas Day, Joy to the World, and Silent Night's on here.
Yeah.
Great song. Huh?
Oh, silent night, sleep in heavenly peace. Okay.
That's great.
Sleep in heavenly peace.
How about the first Noel?
The first Noel. The first Noel. I
You're
can't
great.
remember. I can only remember just a little of it.
No, okay, one more. Oh, Holy Night.
Oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. Yeah.
Very good. What does Christmas mean to you?
Christmas?
Yep.
It makes me think of Jesus Christ, who's Christmas is, Christmas,
Celebrate his birthday.
It should be pronounced Christmas.
Christmas, right.
But no, I thought that Christmas was a time to get closer to the family and to be happy.
It is. The great thing about Christmas is, to celebrate.
Yeah, right.
To celebrate.
Right.
And to be close to family. Have a chance to say to family, to come together around the hearth.
Right.
And listen to music that you've been hearing all your life.
Right.
Now we have a new contribution to what we can hear.
Right.
Yeah. Do you agree that Good Vibrations was the most revolutionary album?
Single? Single.
Single, I mean, yeah.
I think so. I have to agree with people when they tell me that. It took us 6 weeks to record it. It was done in sections, like there were like, I don't know how many sections, 6, 10, whatever sections, We cut one part in one studio, another segment in another studio. We used 5 different studios for the same record.
Yeah.
So we got a unique sound out of it.
Right.
Plus we got some sales, plus made people happy.
Can't beat that. No. But why was it revolutionary?
Because it was done in a subtler kind of way, and it was just brilliantly constructed.
When people say to you, Brian Wilson is a genius.
Yes.
What do you say?
I say, well, Brian Wilson is a genius, man. Brian, am I a genius? Maybe I am a genius. Maybe so. Yeah.
There is a certain part of you that is more creative than most of us.
Well, I have my gift.
You do?
Yeah.
Well, what is it?
Music.
It is music.
Yeah.
It is. Do you see it differently, you think? I mean,
how do you mean, Charlie? How do you mean?
Well, I mean, does music resonate with you? Did it resonate with you earlier? Did the capacity to see the possibilities of how sounds come together? I
saw in the future a vision of music in a dream I had one night, and I foresaw the future. And it was way, way, way farther than now even,
Yeah.
I heard all kinds of celestial, heavenly sounds. It just blew my mind.
Yeah.
I think eventually we're headed for heaven. I think so.
Are you heading for heaven?
Yeah.
All of us have a chance.
Yes.
Today, what brings you the most joy today? Creating music?
Yeah. Actually creating music, singing at the piano, running, taking laps at a park I go to. I run. I'm trying to get in good shape. Things like that.
Could you have written more lyrics?
Could I have?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Just not what you do?
No, I can write lyrics, but the collaborators write better lyrics than I can.
People like Bernie and Jimmy Webb,
right.
people like that.
They're better than me at that kind of thing.
Yeah. Are you think you're born to do one or the other, compose or write lyrics?
I think I was born to compose music and now and then some lyrics, but mostly music. Yeah, mostly music.
What how do you hear music? Tell me the process for you.
I hear music in my head. I can hear music in my head, but I can't hear a whole arrangement in my head. I can hear a melody, like a melody.
Yeah.
I can hear like da 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 da. I can hear that in my head. But if it's like all kinds of voices and instruments, I can't conceive of it in my head. I'm not smart enough, I guess. Maybe I'm smart enough.
You were smart enough.
I just don't know how to be Phil Spector.
But what would a Phil Spector do?
To what?
To the music. I mean, Phil Spector would be somebody who would be able to take the music and know what to do with it.
He would take the music and he would mold it like this, different instruments and different like voices and violins and angelic voices.
He's like an arranger,
right?
Then?
He's a producer.
Yeah.
But he molds his records. He fabricates them. It's like a Rolls Royce. He constructs the Rolls Royce of the music business. He's considered the Rolls Royce of the music business.
Yeah, because he can do all those kinds
Oh
of
yeah,
things.
oh he can do anything. Yeah.
Now, who does it for you now?
Who does what?
What Phil Spector has done.
I do it for myself.
You do it for yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
You produce, in a sense, your own stuff.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Smile and the success of Smile.
Right.
Was that the most satisfying thing for you musically? The fact that this thing that you had worked on for so hard and for so many years, when it finally came into fruition, it was viewed, Rolling Stone magazine gave it 5 stars. Everybody raved about it. The criticism was overwhelming.
Well, I haven't told you this yet. I'm going to tell you now, though.
Tell me.
We premiered it in London in 2004,
Right.
and people at the end of the concert, people stood up and clapped for almost 10 minutes. Almost 10 minutes. That's a long standing ovation. It's a very long standing ovation. 10 minutes. You have to admit that. You know.
Did it bring tears to your eyes?
No, not tears. It just brought joy to me. I am so proud. Charlie, I was so nervous to do that show. I was so nervous to do that doggone Smile show in London that I almost had to go to the bathroom and do my thing.
But you were confident that you had the thing that you wanted to create.
Right.
And what you were going to perform that night
Yes.
was what you had dreamed of doing. It had
Right.
come together. You had
Right.
confidence in it, yet you were still nervous.
Yeah. I was still nervous.
Is it the greatest thing you've ever done?
But Smile?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but by far, yeah.
Why?
Because it's got a first movement, a second movement, and a third movement. It's a 3-movement rock opera. And we call it a happy teenage symphony to God.
I know you do.
And but that's how we constructed it. It was just produced at that level. Yeah.
and more of your genius is there than any other thing you've done.
I would say my genius showed a little bit on Smile, yes. It was Smile.
We've talked about this before. Why did it take so long?
You mean why we would leave it on the shelf for so long?
Yeah. 20 years.
Because I never wanted to finish it. I just didn't want to. I had no real overwhelming reason why not to do it, but I just didn't.
And then, so what made it the right time to do in 2004?
Well, my wife and I and my publicity agents got together one day for lunch, and they said, Brian, we think it's time to do Smile in concerts, and then record it as an album. And I said, I'm all for it. So I called up my Van Dyke Parks, my friend. He came over and we created a third movement for it, right?
Yeah.
And then we took it to London, like I said before. Then we took it to the studio, and took us 1 month only, to do the whole album.
Yeah. You were great at Live 8, too.
Right.
You were terrific
Yeah.
at Live 8. Some say you were the star of Live 8.
Well, I don't know about Star of Live 8, but I really remember it pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, this was in Glasgow. Where were you?
I think it was Berlin, wasn't it?
You in Berlin?
Yeah.
But you really did people, the praise for you coming out of that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
What, is it magic for you when you perform?
Is it magic? Yeah. The band that plays behind me
Yeah.
is magic. Yeah.
All of that. You never lose it.
I have an 18, I don't know, it's the 18 or 19 piece orchestra, total orchestra,
Right.
including strings and horns.
Right.
And I'm telling you, Charlie, they're the best. They are the best that I've ever worked with.
How about Johnny Cash?
Johnny Cash, I never liked.
You never liked him as musically.
No, I never did.
Walk the Line,
No, I never liked him.
Folsom.
No, I never liked him.
The music.
His music I like, but his voice kind of bothered me. To be honest with you.
Yeah. No, I'm fascinated by it. But what was it that bothered you about it, you think?
Because of you, I walk the line. It just had a strange voice, you know.
Whose voice do you love?
Whose voice do I love?
Love.
My daughter's.
Really?
Yeah.
Is she going to be a singer?
She might. Sure.
You want her to be?
I want. Yeah.
Would you like for your children to be in the music world?
Yeah. Yeah.
Better introduce them to Clive Davis very quick.
Right.
It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
I know, it's great to see you. What's coming up for you beyond this release of this Christmas
The album, you mean?
Yeah.
What's
beyond
coming
that.
up for me?
Yeah.
Well, more trying to write songs for my rock and roll album next year.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it.
What's the album going to be?
It's going to be a rock and roll album with very, very, very energetic and fast moving, groovy, down the pipe rock and roll. It's going to be right down the pipe rock and roll type trip.
Does it make you sad that the Beach Boys ended?
Did it make me sad?
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. My brothers died too. My brothers died. And yeah, I was a little saddened by it. Yeah.
What was the joy of that for you? What was it great?
The joy of breaking up?
No, the joy of being there, having the Beach Boy, being part of the Beach Boys.
Oh, I was proud as hell. I mean, I really was proud to be a Beach Boy. I really was. They're a very good group. They were, in their time, they were probably one of the better groups in the whole business.
They sure were. The Neil Diamond.
Yeah.
What's the relationship with Neil Diamond and his new album?
Well, I don't really know him. I don't have a relationship with him.
Yeah.
But I made up some background vocals for one of the songs called Delirious Love.
I know.
And we did it on the Jay Leno show. I don't know if you saw it.
I didn't see it, but I know about
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Anyway, so that's that. That was that.
But the point is that somebody approached him with the idea that, it'd be great to have you do something for the album. And I think he said, God, that would be wonderful, but he'd never do it.
Well, I surprised him. He called me up and he goes, Brian, I'm so blown out over those vocals you did. He goes, they're so angelic. They're angelic. I said, thank you, Neil. Thank you.
Yeah.
He thought I was angelic.
Are you angelic?
Yeah. Yeah.
You are a little bit angelic, aren't
Yes.
you? Yeah.
Yes.
So are you going to do more of that kind of thing? I mean, other singers you might...
Only if I'm asked.
Yeah.
Only if I'm asked to do it.
Yeah, but don't you think you'd be asked if people knew that you'd be receptive?
I think Neil called, so that's one,
You like his voice?
Yeah. Yeah, I've always liked Neil Diamond's voice. Always. Always liked it.
Who do you like, the other kinds of musicians that you have great admiration for, either as composers?
Okay, I'll run it down for you. Paul McCartney, John Lennon,
right,
Phil Spector,
right,
Burt Bacharach, Motown, like that. Those
Jimmy Webb.
Jimmy Webb, Elton John, the Rolling Stones. I mean, I can go up the Beatles. I can go on forever.
Yeah, and see, what's interesting about this is the fact that you named the people that have had longevity.
Right.
These are the people that everybody else would say they'd be high on my list too, which says, for you, with your creativity, and you're a musicologist, whatever the right word is.
Right. Musician,
right, puts it together. Is there anything that you had Smile and you live with Smile?
Right.
Anything else that you have lived with wanting to do that you have not yet done?
Like I said, my rock and roll album.
That's it.
That's my biggie for the year. Yeah. I can't tell you enough about it, Charlie. There's no way, Charlie. I'm telling you, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. We're going to make an album, a rock and roll album.
And then you'll take it on the road?
That's very possible, yeah. Very possible.
So after all the things that you have been through,
yeah,
it worked out okay.
So far, let's put it that, knock on wood, so far it's worked out okay.
Well, when the rock and roll album comes out, will you come here?
You know I will, Charlie. You know I will.
Because I promised I'd let you out of here so you could go meet your dinner plan.
No. We're not going to. I was kidding you about that.
I thought you had to go to dinner.
No, we're going to go right now. We're going right now.
All right. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Charlie.
When the rock and roll album comes out, you'll come back here.
I will come back.
And we'll listen to it.
All right, Charlie.
Thank you for joining us. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Michael Boyd is here. He is the artistic director of the Royal Shakespeare Company in the United Kingdom. In April of 2006, the RSC will host a year-long festival called The Complete Works. It will mark the first time that all 37 plays, songs, sonnets, and long poems written by William Shakespeare will be performed together. I am pleased to welcome Michael Boyd to this table for the first time. As I said that, you said, I said, this is huge. You say, it's going to be fun.
That's the primary, fundamental reason we're doing it, is to give pleasure. We believe that having a national and international knees up for certainly my favourite artist is something that will put a smile on people's faces. Even if it's a smile from a distance, so people are just glad that it's happening. But hopefully, obviously, more make people come and
This has
and
never
smile.
been done before?
No, as far as we know. It may be that someone will come out of the woodwork and say, we've done this, and that's fine, and I'll be very happy about that. But it's certainly the first time we've done anything as ambitious as this.
When you arrived at the Royal Shakespeare, what condition was it?
I think it had lost some of its confidence. I think it had lost confidence in its philosophy. It was formed in 59-60 on the inspiration of European ensemble theatre. Peter Hall went across and was hugely inspired by what artists were doing who stayed together kind of for a lifetime and dedicated themselves to the art of theatre making. And he saw that in contrast to the hire and fire of most British and American theatre. And he wondered, what would it be like if we extend this summer season of Shakespeare repertoire that had been done at the Shakespeare Memorial Theatre before and turned it into a real workshop that actors are going to commit themselves to for years, for a period of years, so that it becomes a moment in their life that they will never forget. And I think that the zeitgeist of the 80s and the 90s nibbled away at that idealism. Agents nibbled away at the actor's idealism in committing themselves to a lifetime project. And I think eventually the RSC slightly lost confidence in it. The company was also quite poor. We were 3 million in deficit.
Yeah. No home
and
base.
I think the morale was a wee bit low, and we didn't have a regular arrangement for performing in London.
Then so why did you come?
That's the best time to come when an organisation is not firing on all cylinders, because that's the only time that an organisation as large as the RSC will accept change. If it's doing fine, it may be headed in the wrong direction, but people won't accept change. And
if it ain't broke, don't fix it, they say.
Yeah. And the RSC wasn't broke, but it was hurt, and it was wounded, and morale was low.
I was looking at this quote. You said, the main thing I've done is bash about with a machete to create a clearing.
I was feeling flamboyant. There's some of the old presumptions about the RSC that I felt I had to clear away.
Like?
Well, I think there was an assumption that you had to constantly be in search of high-profile artists to do the work. The Royal Shakespeare Company is famous for collective theatre making, and I wanted to re-celebrate that. So I had to cut away at some of those assumptions. Actually, wastage was, I think what I was talking about there was money.
Yeah.
We travel steerage now. We didn't always travel steerage. Things like that. If we want the freedom to be wildly irresponsible artists, we have to be terribly responsible budget holders.
Interesting. What about Adrian Noble?
He's the reason I came to Stratford in the first place. He hired me from Glasgow, where I'd run a theatre for 11 years.
What kind of theatre was it?
It's a theatre that I founded. It was a church in the East End of Glasgow, very near Glasgow Cross, where various executions took place. It was opposite a tattoo artist. And we converted this church and turned it into a theatre. First of all, it became the most popular bar in town with a theatre attached because we didn't have any money to put on shows. From the bar? And we did. We put theatre on through the bar. Then eventually we began to get government funding and private funding and so on. And we ended up, after, I would say, maybe about 5 years, moving in quite creative directions, attracting international money. We never really became fantastically rich there, but we did attract a lot of festival funding, so a show that maybe was going to go abroad would get money from abroad, and that would enable us to do it at home.
But it proved that you knew how to build a theatre.
Yes, I think I'm the first artistic director of the RSC that's run a theatre company before.
The first artistic director ever run a theatre company?
It was a shock for me running the RSC, so it must have been a tremendous shock for all
that you've done.
For other people to be suddenly looking after nearly 600 people.
How long have you loved Shakespeare?
I loved him at school.
Yeah.
I loved him at school. I don't remember going through... I do remember a travelling group of players coming to my school when I was probably about 12 and thinking they were really sad with their tired, wee costumes. And I thought it was very old-fashioned and boring and nothing to do with anything. I think I first started to enjoy it on a record, actually. It was Paul Schofield doing King Lear on record. And there was part of me was going, hold on a moment, this is a bit lardy, old-fashioned. But at the same time, I was drawn in by the power and the beauty of the words. There was a kind of vertiginous quality about the play. But I think that was the first time the bit with Edgar and Gloucester on the cliff, where Edgar's describing this non-existent drop to the beach that Gloucester's he's going to pretend that Gloucester's jumping to. The sheer power of that poetry, I felt vertigo. I have vertigo, and that poetry induced it in me as I was just listening to that record. So I suppose that would be the moment.
You were in Russia. I mean, you were in the Soviet Union. What brought you to the Soviet Union?
My Russian teacher at school...
Which was?
In Edinburgh.
Right.
Went over to the Soviet Union quite a lot and was saying that there was a very exciting post-revolutionary movement in Russian theatre, which Stalin sat on, repressed brutally, and which now was beginning to find, all the experiments of that time were beginning to find their way back into the theatre, very quietly, very under the radar, but it was happening, and it was very, very interesting. And then at university, at Edinburgh University, I got very interested in people like Meyerholt and the kind of legacy post-Stanislavski. The idea of theatre as a total thing, that it wasn't just about words and performance, it was emotions writ large on stage, with a kind of stage poetry. Not just an actor saying lines, not just character and not just realism, that it could move beyond realism to something that expressed, I suppose, that which we can't express in words. A friend of mine is a composer called Craig Armstrong, and his first solo album was called The Space Between Us. And it's that space that's not definable by words. And there's something about what can happen on stage between characters, that emotional chemistry expressed physically, larger than life on stage, that really interested me. Anyway, I applied for a British Council fellowship to go to the Soviet Union. It was very difficult at that time. Ballerinas were fine, violinists were fine, anyone who didn't use words were fine.
Look,
but of course, a theatre director who uses words was a bit dodgy, and it took a while for the Ministry of Culture to say okay. In fact, it didn't happen until the Malaya Bronaya Theatre came to the Edinburgh Festival, and I was interviewing Anatoly Efros for a magazine that he was asked, and I said, I'm planning to come to the Soviet Union, I'm waiting for my visa and for the Ministry of Culture to come through. And he said, where are you going? And I said, to the Sovremennik Theatre. And he said, you don't want to go there, come to us. And that was the way it got done. And that was the way I managed to actually get there. And ever since, I suppose that period raised the ceiling of my ambitions about theatre, the tremendously strong belief in that country, in what I do for a living. In our countries, we're a bit ignorant about what a director does. He sort of sits in a chair with director written on the back and bosses people around, hires the actors. In England particularly is quite scholarly figure who interprets the text. But the idea of a director as being an artist in their own right is quite alien to our culture. And so it bred that hubris in me to believe that I could take my art form seriously. Yeah. It also stopped me ever believing that theatre wasn't a popular art form. Outside every tube station, every subway station in Moscow, there were little kiosks where people would buy their theatre tickets. and every theatre show was full. Times have changed since, the fall of communism.
How have they changed?
Subsidies.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Have
okay.
collapsed.
So there's more.
Subsidies have collapsed, and also other media have become more interesting. The theatre was the only place, as in Shakespeare's time, where the truth could get under the radar. Books you could refuse to publish. Films you could snip out the bits you didn't want. All the recorded media were never going to be the most lively media. Theatre had its KGB officer in the rehearsal room, but the poor KGB officer was bullied. Was bullied, and you could always slip through. And Shakespeare had the Lord Chamberlain's man in his rehearsal room, and he slipped through the radar. So it gave me a particular. I was able to see that Shakespeare was writing under censorship, having spent a year.
But take me from that idea to theatre in London today, Stratford, or wherever in England, and theatre that whatever you know about theatre in New York today. Mm-hmm. Is it serving that kind of role? Is it a powerful engine of our culture today?
I think the theatre is waking up to the fact, again, that in these two liberal democracies, that there is a gap. There is a gap not served by necessarily or other art forms. Not even the novel. That the act of gathering together and either achieving or failing to achieve a kind of consensus in the same room as a group of people tackling issues and arguing it out on stage in front of you. This is quite a powerful forum. And I think we are taking our responsibilities politically and socially perhaps a bit more robustly now than the theatre has for quite a few decades.
Let's take it to a contemporary issue. The Blair administration support of the war in Iraq.
Yeah.
I mean, how do we see that?
Well,
on stage in London?
We are about to take into London a play by the Northern Irish playwright Frank McGuinness, a fellow Northern Irishman, who wrote a wonderful play called The Sons of Ulster March Towards the Somme, which is about the gunpowder plot, the Catholic gunpowder plot, and which, because now is the 400th anniversary of that, and it tilts that story of how the British Parliament was threatened with being exploded and mass mayhem and murder, and looks at what the Protestant government was doing to the Catholic population post-Reformation in Shakespeare's time, and looks at the dilemma faced by the dissidents of the time, by the government of the time, and it very clearly speaks for now in terms of the threat that
terror has.
That terror has, and where it comes from. And recently at the National Theatre, Nick Hytner did a production of Henry V where he set it very directly in the Iraq War. I'm about to do Henry V in a couple of years' time. I don't know where we'll be by then, but it will definitely, what's happening in the world will definitely feed into our rehearsal room.
I want to come back to this idea about the appreciation of the director as an artistic person. Tell me how you see the director and what it is the director does that fills that definition.
I think there's a lot that we do that is interpretative, that is therapeutic.
Interpretive of text?
Interpretive of text, yes. That is therapeutic in terms of trying to do what you do in an interview, which is bring out the best in your guest. I, as a director, have to bring out the best in my actors. I have to make sure that all of them is coming out. Mm-hmm. There's some moment in amongst all that where I do have the ambition to make something beautiful and powerful happen on stage. And it's not about being a puppeteer. It's about just nudging an actor to think about moving around another actor and realizing that that moment of maintaining the tension between those two people could be as strong as a long shot by Antonioni in a film where he moves outside the room, round the courtyard, back in through the bars, and there's great tension being brought there. That we're capable of training people to make better work, but also we're sculptors, actually, ourselves, that we make sculptures on stage, that there is such a thing as spatial stage poetry, if you like. Now, you indulge in that at the expense of character or narrative or entertainment, and you are not making good work. But it's you entertain, or you tell stories, or you create good characters, and you don't try and do that. And I think you're the more prosaic for it. And you're not exploiting your art form to the full, is all I'm saying.
How often, and is it most of the time, do you hit where you want it to be, where the artistic vision you have plays out in terms of what the audience sees? Is it most of the time?
Moments. It's not. I don't.
Moments within a play.
I don't have an artistic vision in advance and then carry that out. It's more like a process of stalking a beast. It's trying to sniff it in the wind, and then garner the resources of the show in the service of the stalking of whatever that beast might be. And you might not even know what beast it is you're stalking.
Well, give me what the beast is. The beast is is the magic that
it's the most
captures
vivid. It's the, well, say with Hamlet. It's what was Shakespeare after?
Yeah.
What's the production Shakespeare wanted is one way of describing the beast. It's a terrible question to ask yourself, because who knows?
Yeah.
But you've got to do your best guessing in advance. You've got to do your scholarship in advance. You've got to dig down in the culture of Shakespeare's time. You've got to realize that Polonius, when he says, "To thine own self be true, and thou canst not then be false to any man," is talking as chief hypocrite in the play, and that's not to be taken at face value. You've got to realize that Hamlet is a very, very dangerous man, and that Claudius is also a very dangerous man. And you piece together the extent to which Shakespeare is writing about the court of his own country. Denmark is the safety valve. Put it over in Denmark and nobody will put me in prison. Yeah. But he's writing about his own times, about very, very dangerous times where civil war is constantly threatened, and discrimination is rife, and then you find the look, you find the team of actors, and you go in search. And what you're looking for is something dangerous, something lyrical, something that takes on mortality. You bring everyone's, you bring your own and Hamlet's memory of your father to bear. You bring relationships that everyone's had to bear on Hamlet's relationship with Ophelia, and you go in search. And yes, there are moments in the theatre where, I do feel that's absolutely it. But very rarely a whole show do I feel, yes, good, we've done that. I think that's best left up to other people, really, the audience, ultimately. And I never feel I've done it in rehearsals. I think Scorsese says he doesn't never finishes a film, he's dragged off the set.
Yeah, he does.
And I think I would subscribe to that view. I never feel I've
the curtain is going to open. You
finished it.
Yeah. The curtain was opening, so I had to be there.
Yeah.
You've thought about this a lot, I'm sure. I mean, why Shakespeare? Why? What makes Shakespeare And why was Shakespeare Shakespeare?
As I say, he was born into a time of extraordinary crisis, the passing of the Middle Ages of faith and the birth of a new age of skepticism, a mercantile age. He was born particularly in England at a time of a brutal and very, very fast revolution, of the sacking of all the Catholic churches, the removal of the Virgin Mary, the destruction of all images. In Stratford, we have the church where Shakespeare's buried, Holy Trinity. You can still see the scars of that decision to take away all those graven images. And he was himself from a Catholic background. And he managed to deal with crisis and not get into jail like Thomas Kyd, Ben Jonson. Most of his contemporaries got into terrible trouble. Christopher Marlowe was assassinated. How did Shakespeare survive? That's one of the things that makes Shakespeare Shakespeare. He survived. And one of the main ways that he both survived and became so good was that, unlike, say, Christopher Marlowe or Ben Jonson, who couldn't keep the author out of it, couldn't keep the editorial out of their plays, Shakespeare hid the editorial in dialogue. And the truth lies like something out of the Da Vinci Code, somewhere in between two characters. And the play happens there, mysteriously, but with clarity and with great power. And his ability to dramatize the split, whether it's the split between being a country boy in Stratford and the court in London, whether it's the split between Catholic and Protestant, whether it's the split, as I say, between the age of faith and the age of rationalism and mercantilism, whether it's the split between the old Anglo-Saxon and the Latin of the language of power. He sets them up, gets them talking to each other, and he never judges either side. If there's a judgment, because if he did, people would know what his editorial was, and they could silence him. The editorial, if it's there, is so wrapped up in the nature of his writing that it becomes good art, in that it's indivisible from its form. Whereas a contemporary Ben Jonson wrote beautifully, but it was an essay. Christopher Marlowe wrote stunningly, but it was a series of monologues. Eminem and Jay-Z are brilliant, highly metrical, rhyming, relevant, passionate writers. They're monologues. They're not, and they're editorials. They're not capable in the way that Shakespeare was of creating this. It's not a hologram, it's something much more profound than that. It's something that actually almost approaches the condition of life in between the opposites of Shakespeare's existence, both as a person and as an artist. I would say it is that duality in Shakespeare that is the fundamental DNA of his greatness.
Why do you think we've never had anyone come close to approaching him? I mean, a lot of those factors have been present.
Well, when I was in the Soviet Union, you would think that maybe there might be someone there who was trying to codify the truth,
right,
and catch it in that special amber of drama.
Right.
But they didn't. There were other things that Shakespeare had going for him. He also lived on the cusp of an oral culture and a printed culture. So even his style, his poetry, the reason his poetry is like what it is, arises out of necessity. In the same way that his ambiguity arises out of a political necessity, if you like. His style arises out of mnemonic. It's not a literary culture. A lot of people can't read.
Right.
And meter is to make it more memorable. Rhyme is to make it more memorable. Different meters are to make you conjure up different emotions, different ideas, different moods. Different rhyme schemes similarly say different messages. It's as a mnemonic. So the vividness and the muscularity of that language is partly a result
It was a non-literary
living.
time.
And once you have print,
Yeah.
you're in a different world altogether. And we, from that moment on, that was forever.
Do you have a sense of what kind of actors perform Shakespeare best?
Actors with big hearts.
Big hearts.
Big hearts. Shakespeare does terrible things to Rosalind, to Hamlet, to King Lear.
Yes.
King Lear is the modern Job in a way. It's a terrible thing, but in some cultures, I think we know more about King Lear than we do about Job. We can talk about suffering through King Lear almost more easily than we can through
So
Job.
Shakespeare rather than the Bible.
Yeah, it's an odd one. But big hearts, yes. I think that's all. Big hearts, big mouths to get round that big language. Russians and Italians think the English, particularly the English, don't know how to open their mouths. And Shakespeare knew how to get you opening your mouth. And expressive. We're very good at loving the Russians and the Italians for their expansiveness. And Shakespeare was that man with his verse. Strong, just physically strong, because Shakespeare is very demanding.
You have to endure.
Yeah. Bright, sharp as needles. Good Shakespearean actors. There's a lot of seeming hurdles to jump over, and the easier you can jump over them and not be bothered about the fact that it's 17th century English as opposed to contemporary English, the easier that is, the better. It's easy to say Shakespeare. It's very easy to say. And actors with great charisma, because there's nobody in a Shakespeare play who's small in spirit.
So you have to measure up to the character. And if you can't fill those shoes of the character, you can't be in a Shakespearean play well.
No, you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be.
And you hope to accomplish by doing this thing that you're going to do in 2006, this festival.
I hope we learn more about Shakespeare. There's a very moving and powerful dialogue between the older Shakespeare and the young Shakespeare, the angry young Shakespeare and the still angry but maybe a bit wiser older Shakespeare.
Goes like?
Well, it's very interesting. A very early piece, Henry VI, has a crazed, almost purgatorial rebel in Jack Cade, the one who famously says, "Let's kill all the lawyers."
Yeah.
And he has a vision of a society where there's no trade, where the financial district is turned into grass where his horse can eat. It's almost a sort of a hippie utopian vision where all the trappings of contemporary society, money goes, all the rest of it. And it's seen as quite a frightening vision in that play. In The Tempest, towards the very end of Shakespeare's career, there's an old courtier who works against the cynical, brutal powermongers, who arrives on the island of The Tempest and propounds almost word for word the same vision that Jack Cade, the frightening revolutionary, put forward. But this time it's presented positively by Shakespeare as a utopian thing. And for the audience, think about this. Think about it seriously, because it's coming out of the mouth of Gonzago, the oldest courtier in this very corrupt court, who has not been corrupted. And he's saying this as he approaches thoughts of mortality. Think about it, he's saying. And these are two very similar but very different Shakespeares. There's the Shakespeare who was paid by the government and the Shakespeare who wasn't paid by the government. It's interesting to hear them talk to each other. halfway through the history cycle that I'm about to embark on of 8 plays talking about the history of England. Shakespeare's patron, Lord Strange, died mysteriously, possibly assassinated. And Shakespeare's company, who had been quite controversial, were hired by the government, as opposed to Lord Strange, who was one of the leading dissident aristocrats. Suddenly they find themselves being taken into the court, very flattering, good for the bank balance, but also quite controlling. And seeing how Shakespeare dealt working from inside the system, like a Gorbachev or something, and working outside the system, how they talk to each other, that's very... and so just personally, every time I read a new Shakespeare play or work on a new play, I learn more about the ones I thought I knew already, and I want to invite people in.
Right, every time you work on a new one to you, another one, new one for you
to stage.
To stage, yeah. You learn about an older one.
Yeah, it teaches me something about working on Hamlet. Taught me lots about Midsummer Night's Dream that I may have done a few years ago. Working on The Tempest, as I say, taught me quite a lot about the Henry VI plays. And I think through learning about Shakespeare, looking into the mirror that Shakespeare holds up to us, in this time that we're in, of a kind of post-millennial anxiety about authority, about moral authority, about spiritual authority, about political authority, I hope that painting on this huge canvas, holding up this very big mirror, to think about over a year, to take a long look in that mirror, I think it's a good time to do that. I think it's I feel good about making that invitation to people to come and join with us on that.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here. Michael Boyd is the artistic director of the Royal Shakespeare Company. The Complete Works Festival that he has just eloquently defined and given reason for being begins in April of 2006 and runs for a year, 12 months. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.